set down. That first two we cannot critique, because how can you talk about something that's nebulous? What we can do is the last two. And what we're going to do is we're going to attack those last two premises. That it was completed at the time of Uthman, that's the mid-7th century, and that it has not changed. That's all that we're going to do today, and that's all you need to do. So, where will we go? Well, today I'm only going to hit 4 areas. There's about 8 areas that we could hit. I'm just going to hit 4 today. The earliest 6 manuscripts, we're going to look at the 2 layers of the Song of Palimpsest, we're looking at the 7 carbon dating lab reports, and we're looking at 31 different Arabic Qurans. So these are the material that we're going to get today. Now, that's an awful lot of material. Put your pens on, you're not going to keep up. Let's go right into it. Let's look at those 36 manuscripts. And remember that in 660, we know of at least 9 codices that were sent to 9 cities, according to Al-Bukhari, volume 6, hadith number 509 and 510. That's all the Muslims have to go on. They only have those otherwise, those who have to go on. And in 509, it says we don't have time to unpack it, let me try to summarize. In 509, it says that Abu Bakr and Uthman, they were sitting there discussing the fact that their numbers had been written down, and they were realizing that an awful lot of those who had memorized it, because it was only written on bones and stone and star, weeds, but the vast majority of the Quran were memorized by the companions, the Sahabas, and the Sahabas. And so because of the fact that they had died in the Battle of Yamallah, many of them had died, they needed to do something about it, and so they got Sa'id ibn Tabi. Who was Sa'id ibn Tabi? He was the secretary of Muhammad. What did the secretary do? They write, am I correct? So obviously we had someone who could read and write at the time of the book. They brought him forward in front of them, and there in 509, they asked him, they commissioned him to do that very thing, to write down what the Prophet had not done. And he says very clearly, how can I do what the Prophet hadn't done? Proving that it had not been done by the time Muhammad died in 632. Are you getting that? They said, nonetheless, you're to do it. So he goes and he searches here and that and yonder, and he finds one verse that was from one person alone. Now we get to 510, and it gets really interesting, because in Akhbar 510, he then takes Hafsa's copy, the one that he had done 18 years or 20 years before. This is now in 652. There are a variety of different Qurans. There are many different Qurans. And so now he realized, Uthman says, we better do something about it. Now, 20 years later, he turns to Zayd ibn Tabi'in, the same secretary who had written the first recension, and he says, we want you to rewrite it. Why would you have to rewrite something that's perfect to begin with? First problem. Secondly, we want you to write it in the Qurayshi dialect. We're going to talk about more of that this afternoon, so I want to unpack that, why the problem is with that dialect. But then he says, you and 3 others, Zubair, Alas, and Harith, the 4 of you are to rewrite it down, send out copies to every province. We know there were 9 provinces at that time. That means 9 different Qurans were sent out to 9 cities. Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, Alexandria, Herat, and Aden, Herat, and Nishapur. There are the 9 cities that they were sent to. That means there should be 9 Qurans that we should be able to find today. Are you following me on this? We're only talking about 1,400 years ago. That's not very long. Listen, you can come down to the British Library there in London, and I will show you the city Atticus, which is from the 4th century. That's 300 years earlier. Right next to it is the Alexandrinus, which is the entire New and Old Testament. That's from the 4th century. That's from the 5th century. That is 200 years before the Quran. So certainly Muslims should be able to find one of those 9 Qurans. And we're asking them, 9, not 4, not 2, 9 Qurans you need to find. So that's the problem. Now we go to the metropolitan codices. Of those 9, 4 of them are known as the metropolitan codices. One became very popular in Damascus by Ibn Ka'b. His codex became very popular in Damascus. Another by Ibn Masud. David's been talking about Ibn Masud, and there are 3 surahs missing. 113, 114 is missing, and also the Fatiha is missing out of Ibn Masud's, and that became very popular in Baghdad. You have this codex of Ibn Musa, which became very popular in Basra, and then you have the codex of Zayd ibn Thabit, which is the one that was finally chosen. That was the one from Medina. So you have the 4 metropolitan codices. Dr. Arthur Jeffrey in the 1930s, just looking at the traditions that refer to these 4 codices, came up with 15,000 differences that he recorded. And that was in 1935 he recorded this. And he found another 11 codices that were referred to besides these 4 metropolitan codices. So we're talking about a multiplicity of Qurans, that thousands of differences. But who has found these differences? Where is it we're going to go for these differences? We need to do our own investigation. Don't expect the Muslims to do this. So we've been asking that, and for 37 years that I've been working in Islam, we have always assumed that the Muslims knew what they were talking about. When they said that they had a complete Quran that was unchanged from the 7th century, from the time of Uthman, we assumed they knew what they were talking about. And whenever I asked them, in every debate I did, where are these Qurans that you say are from the time of Uthman, that's the mid-7th century, complete and unchanged, they always talk about 6 major Qurans, and these are the 6 that you see up there on the screen. You have the Topkapi, the Topkapi from Istanbul. That is considered to be the greatest amongst it. Probably the most prolific, but certainly the greatest because it is the most famous in Istanbul. At the Topkapi Museum. You have the Samarkand in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. That's the second one you see there in the middle. And then on the one on the right, that's the Matul Quran. That's the one in London. There at the British Library. You can go see it. In fact, I was just there a few weeks ago, and it is there on display. And then you have, on the lower left, you have the Persepolis manuscript, which is in the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. That one is being controlled by Dr. François Laroche, who has probably done the most general work on it. And then the Hussein manuscript, which is at the bottom center, which is in Cairo in Egypt. And then the most exciting, the newest one that's been discovered, the Sanaa manuscript, which let's just look at them real carefully. There's the Topkapi, the Samarkand, there's and the Husseini and the Sanaa. So what do the scholars say about them? Well, we need to go to what the Turkish scholars, these are the 2 that really have access. The first 2 that have access to all 6 of these manuscripts in 2002 to 2007. They were given, the first ones that really did germinal work, actually did the work that Muslims should have been doing for 1,400 years. These 2 Turkish scholars living in Istanbul who had access already to the Topkapi and other manuscripts that were there in Turkey, were given access to these 6 manuscripts. They wrote up their findings in 2009. That was translated into English in 2013. I got a hold of it in 2013. As soon as I read the 83 pages of their introduction, which unpacked these 6 manuscripts, I immediately sent off an email to Shabir Ali, Dr. Shabir Ali, the world authority, a best debater on the Quran, and I said I want to do a debate with you on these manuscripts. He agreed to do so. We had a debate in Toronto in 2014. Go look at that debate. It's called the classic debate, J. Smith versus Dr. Shabir Ali. You'll need to watch the first 50 minutes. Because in not 50 minutes, we pretty well destroyed the Quran. Pretty well destroyed it. Because all I did was look at these 6 manuscripts, and I used their own study, but I did something else beyond that. I also got another study from Dr. Dan Brubaker, who's a good friend of mine, who did his doctoral thesis on these 6 manuscripts and 4 others. And he is the first Westerner outside the Muslim world to actually go and see these manuscripts and actually photograph them, film them, and actually come to conclusions on them. Now, I don't have time to go to all their findings. There's Ekmeluddin Ihsanoglu. He is the first of the leading scholars. He said very clearly, and there's Dr. Daya Abdikulic. He's probably the better of the 2 scholars, considered to be the foremost in the Muslim world today on the Quranic manuscripts. And he says this very clearly, both of them. We have none of Uthman's Mus'hafs, nor do we have any copies from those Mus'hafs. These Mus'hafs date from the later Umayyad period. Al-Takulic says no serious scholarly work has been done on these manuscripts. These Mus'hafs date from the early to mid-8th century. They are not Uthmanic, nor copies sent by Uthman. Let's start at the Topkapi. The Topkapi you can see there is by far the best of those manuscripts. It's the most complete. And that's why most Muslims now are reducing themselves to only this manuscript. They've pretty much given up on the other 5. You can see why, because we're going to destroy them right now. I'll show you how easy it is. So really the only thing they have going for them is this manuscript. And that's why almost all the people like Ijaz Ahmed, he only now defends the Topkapi. He and I are going to do a debate in November on this manuscript. So that's yet to come. The conclusions of the scholars of this manuscript is dated from the second half of the 1st century to the first half of the 2nd century. What's the problem with that statement right there? The second half of the 1st century would be from 670 to 720, and the first half of the 2nd century from 720 to 770. How many years do you have there? 100 years. How can he say something like that? How can you just say it's about 100 years that we can date this? Unless you're being more specific. Then he does say later on, well, actually, there are 3 surahs that are dated to the first half of the 2nd century. That means it has to be post 720. So already you can see that he's already admitting that this is an 8th century manuscript. More than that, he has found over 2,270 instances
where there is a difference from the consonantal text of the Fahd manuscript. 2,270 Muslims are up in arms saying this is no difference. Really, there's nothing more than dagger alifs. Yet when you look at it, you will see, here's an example right here. In the Topkapi, it says, you know what we concealed and what he revealed. In the Kyrene text, the 1924 text that we're using today, you know that we conceal and what we reveal. You can see already a difference. Who reveals here? Does he or do we reveal it? There is a theological problem with that one. Here's another one. If you should die or be slain, you shall not be gathered. Versus, if you should die or be slain before him, you shall undoubtedly be gathered. It completely contradicts itself. You can't have contradiction between one text and another. So when they say there's no difference between them, once you start unpacking, these are just two of the 2,000 that we're now looking at. In the debate, I'm not permitted to use any more than that. I can't tell you any more until November. I'll tell you why. In November, we're going to unpack the Topkapi, and we're going to destroy the Topkapi, but I cannot do it till November. Now the Samarkand, this is probably the second. This is another exciting one. This one is considered to be the greatest. Before they reduced it down to the Topkapi, everybody was flouting the Samarkand. The Samarkand was the most famous because it had the most interesting story. Yet it only goes up to Surah 43. And within those 43 surahs, you can see there is an enormous amount of problems. Dr. Altakulic looks at it and he says there are 6 reasons why he discredits this manuscript. It has undisciplined spelling, it has different writing styles, it has scribal mistakes, it has copyist mistakes, it is written by someone with little experience, with later editions. In fact, when you take a look at it, there is only one surah amongst the 43 that's complete, 24 surahs are partial, and 18 don't even exist. Why have we not heard this before, if this is the best they've got? And we now know that this is dated to the 8th century, not to the 7th century, so it's only 1,300 years old. The Muttal manuscript that we have there in London, when you take a look at it, you will see that it is written in a Hijazi script. It also only goes up to Surah 43. Isn't that curious? It only includes 53% of the Quran. Now, there is a dispute on the dating. Altakulic dates it to the early 8th century. Dr. Martin Ling, who has had responsibility for this manuscript longer than anybody else, dates it to the late 8th century. You're going to see this kind of dispute over and over again. And there is a difference between what the Muslim scholars say and the Western scholars. But have you noticed, this is not 7th century. This is 8th century. That's what's important. Al-Huzayni, conclusions on the Al-Huzayni. Altakulic looks at it and says this again is not Uthmanic. It is dated from the early to mid 8th century. I won't go into it. I won't go into all this, but take a look at some of what we're noticing about the Huzayni manuscript. Have you noticed that it is written in a monumental script, which means it has much larger writing and has very few lines per page? That was introduced in the late 8th century. Mid 8th century. But take a look at the coverings they have on it. These are coverings that have been curious. Why are the coverings there? And wouldn't you love to lift them up and find out what they're trying to hide? This is full of these coverings. We'll get back to that. The conclusions are then we get into Petroponus, the Parasino Petroponus, which has been most studied by Dr. François de Roche. There are corrections to the text. It disagrees with the 1924 Kyrene Musaf in 93 places. It has 5 different writers or copyists. Later modifications. The largest piece of this manuscript is only 26% of the Quran. So where is this complete Quran that everybody's talking about? Have you noticed we not found one complete Quran in any of these so far? We're on number 4. We're on number 5. And then we see some differences between this and the 1924 manuscript that we're using today. Here you have that they may establish prayer and make our hearts among them, to so make hearts among them. Now the significance, I don't want to get into all that because we're running out of time. Now we get to the Sonnet, and this is by far my favorite one, because the Sonnet is the one that was discovered in 1975. Because they could not read it, understand it, because most people do not know how to, most Arab scholars are not competent on consonantal text, the Huzn itself. They had to fly down 3 German scholars, Dr. Gertrin, Dr. von Bothmer, and Dr. Oling, in 1981, who are the world's authority on the Arabic script, and they were the ones that actually did the work on it. They quickly took pictures of it and put them into microfilms. Those microfilms, once the Sonnet government heard what they were saying about it, they quickly took them aside and they confiscated them and did not have them get access to those microfilms until 1997. I went to see Dr. Gerrit Quinn in Germany, and I took these pictures of a facsimile that he made for me. Well, didn't make it for me, but he had himself. And if you take a look at the one here on the left, you notice it has a script over here, and then another script here, and then suddenly you go to the other page, and it's 2 completely different scripts. Probably you can't see from that far away. you're actually talking about two different manuscripts here. On the right side, above the yellow mark, it's Surah 19. Below the yellow mark, it jumps to Surah 22. What happened to Surah 20 and 21? You'd like to know. Well, it suddenly appears over here on the left side. It's been added in about 60 years later. If you look at the scripts, if you do a script analysis, paleographical analysis, you'll see that the script has been added at a much later date. See all those orange marks? Can you see all those orange marks? Every time you see an orange mark, that's a manuscript variant. That means a word that is different than the 1924 manuscript we have today. He figures there's about 1,000 manuscript variants in just this manuscript. So, I won't go into their conclusions, we'll get into their conclusions, but what I want to do is I want to look back at what they then found. When they looked at it more carefully, they noticed that there is a layer underneath, an upper layer. This is called a palimpsest. A palimpsest is quite normal whenever you use animal skins like deer skin. You can wash it off and then write over top, and that's what a lot of people have done. There are many palimpsests for the Bible. And the nice thing about it is the ink that disappears immediately, hundreds of years later, start to bleed through. And that's the case with this palimpsest. The ink has bled through now hundreds of years later. And we notice that the ink has bled through. And here you can see a picture of it. Can you see the under layer? This is done under ultraviolet light. And when you put it under ultraviolet light, you can see the two layers. So they have taken these two layers and they have now separated them. And they have found that there are 63 verses under there that are different than the upper layer. In fact, they found 70 differences between the lower layer and the upper layer. The upper layer is dated to 705, so beginning of the 8th century. The lower layer, they want to date to 671. Most likely it's dated to the last 20 years of the 7th century, which would mean this would be the only part of the Quran that we have found today that is from the 7th century. Ooh, that makes it exciting. That's why I love it. And when you look at it, you will see that there are huge problems. Now, Dr. Asma Hilali came out with her book a year ago, in August 2017, that uncovers all this. If you have a chance to read the book, she is disturbed by this because obviously you have a lower layer that doesn't agree with the upper layer, and both the upper and the lower layer don't agree with the Quran we have today. That's problematic in and of itself, but you need to ask, what is it in the lower layer? She says, well, obviously, since it doesn't agree, this must be a school text. School text means it's written by students. Do you see a problem with that? First and foremost, parchments or vellum is hugely expensive. These are valuable material. These are animal skins. You do not give animal skins to students. Secondly, you don't then preserve those animal skins for 1,400 years. Do you see the difficulty? Dr. Gare Quinn, who is the one, Elizabeth Quinn, that's not Gare, sorry, his wife, Dr. Elizabeth Quinn, who has done the best work on this, she has looked at it. She says, no, these are not school texts. Take a look at them and you'll see these 63 verses. When you look at the differences, you will see that this is a nascent Quran being changed, being washed off, and then rewritten over top in 705 because there were too many differences. They were just running out. They were realizing that they could not keep all this scratching up and changing the text, so they just wrote a new text over top, thinking that no one would see it once they had washed it off, which is quite normal for them to think, because that would have been the case for the first few hundred years, but not the first 1,000 years. So what she is looking back, and she's saying very clearly that she concludes that the lower text was in the process of being corrected and made more precisely canonical. Thus, the two layers were stages in the process of canonization, which now makes sense exactly if you look at the dates of the lower and the upper text. The dates of the lower text would be of the monarch's date. The upper text would be his son, Al-Walid. And you can see, if you look at the historiography, we don't have time to get into that, you can realize that that follows the archaeological evidence and it also follows the historical evidence. That's for a talk for another day. When you take a look and you can see, if you just want to do a comparison between the lower text and the upper text, Allah has cursed them for their injustice. That then changes in the 1924, Allah has cursed them for their unbelief. Completely different. Here you have another one where it says Allah with their money and themselves, and then it says did jihad struggle in the name of Allah. So jihad is now introduced into the text, which wasn't there to begin with. Here you have during 4 months, but know that they do not escape Allah and His Prophet, has been changed to, but know that you cannot escape Allah and His Prophet's taken out. Here you can see where they have exchanged the signs of Allah and their oath for a small price, and averted from the way of Allah has been changed. So they've exchanged the signs of Allah for a small price and averted from His way. Here you have an example. And why don't you fight a people who broke their oaths, and they were the first to start aggression, and they intended to drive out the prophet, has been changed to will you? So now it becomes a question. Fight of people who broke their oaths, and they intended to drive out the prophet, and they were the first to start aggression. Now hold on a minute. It changes the two side completely in a different sequence. In chapter 9, verse 17, the lower text says, for these are those whose deeds fell in this world and the next, has been changed. For those, their deeds fell worthless. Now, take a look at the theological differences there. I mean, you can do a doctoral thesis just on this one verse. In fact, I would suggest you could probably do doctoral thesis on every one of these verses. Any one of you want to do it? Any of you young ones? We have an awful lot of work yet to do. When you look at chapter 9, verse 18, in the last day, and he did jihad, struggled in the name of Allah, and did not fear anyone but Allah, for it is expected that those who are successful will be the guide. It has been changed now in modern text to, they either perform the salat, prayer, and give zakat, and fear none but Allah. It is they who are true with guidance. Now instead of, it now becomes salat. So instead of striving for God in jihad, now you must pray. Can you see how that changes the theology? In chapter 24, 98, 80, it says, Allah does not forgive them. Indeed, Allah does not forgive. Now it's been changed to, Allah will not forgive them because they disbelieve in Allah and His Prophet. Now the Shahada has been added there. So now Muhammad is elevated as part of the disbelief. Now, can you see, theologically speaking, that changes everything. Now, there's a doctrine to be done. So, I mean, you can just look at these. I don't want to have time to do it because we do need to keep going. Now, I don't want to get into conclusions. There's a real problem with the conclusions. I mean, there's a real problem with this. But you can see immediately, you've got a number of difficulties. How can you have a text that's different from the upper text? And how can both those texts be different than the Quran we have today? Take a look at those differences, and you will see that there's a theology being created. And you're talking about a period of 20 to 30 years in between the two texts. Proving that and problem with jihad versus Islam. So you can see an enormous amount of material yet we need to work on, yet to come across and to unpack. Then we get to the carbon dating. Back in 2015, you had a Birmingham folio that came out. Did you all remember that in 2015? They had finally found a Quran that is dated to the time of the Prophet himself. And it was dated from 568 to 745. Muhammad was born in 570 and died in 632. So that supports the notion that it was written at the same time as Muhammad. And it was all over the press. The Birmingham University scholars went and did on BBC, where they were front and center. This was the #1 subject for 2 days on BBC. Muslims were ballyhooing the fact that finally we have now proven that we now have the Quran from the time of Muhammad. The difficulty is that these are only 2 folios. Only 2 pages. More than that, when you look at these 2 folios, they include Surah 18, 19, and 20. When you look at Surah 18, 19, and 20, they include the story that David just talked about, Luel Kadmai, the story of Alexander the Great. They include the 7 sleepers of Ephesus, and they include the story of Moses, all of which are borrowed stories. Take that into consideration. These are all borrowed stories, of which the Quran is replete with. The Quran is full of borrowed stories. About 70% of the Quran we can now trace back to other writings. All of which, if they're borrowed, means they come earlier. Am I correct? If you borrow, they have to be, what you're borrowing from has to pre-exist what you then finally come up with. So when you take a look at this, you can see the carbon date. Look at the dates, 568 to 645. Is there a problem with that from a historical theological standpoint? Notice no Muslim scholar has come and supported these dates. Only the populist press has supported these dates. What's wrong with those dates? Now, you might say, well, that's a huge gap between 568 to 645. That's true. Carbon dating is very inexact. What's the bigger problem? When was the Quran finally canonized? 652. So even if you go with the latest date, it's 7 years before the canonization of the Quran. You got a problem here. But more than that, if you're going to use carbon dating, you need to go back to what the same labs that carbon dated that manuscript. You need to go back to what they're finding with the Sanaa manuscript, which is considered to be meaning a stronger manuscript, because we don't know where these 2 pages come from. Most scholars today believe these 2 pages come from the Sanaa manuscript. And you need to go back to the Sanaa manuscript. You need to look and see the dates. Now take a look at that graph there, and if you look here, notice these four right here. You can't read, it's too far away. That is taken from 4 different laboratories: Lyon, Kiel, Zurich, and Oxford. Oxford is the same laboratory that dated the 2 folios from Birmingham. Take a look at where the earliest and latest date. Now, before I do that, I want to just show you here. This right here is the life of Muhammad, and that right there is when the Quran, according to the Islamic traditions, was canonized. Do you notice that in all of these surveys, in fact, in all of these datings, they all predate the canonization of the Quran? More than that, those 4 labs, all of these here, predate 550. And they go right back to the 400s. That means they're 100 years before Muhammad's birth in 570, the beginning of the revelation for Muhammad in 610, the finishing of the revelation in 632, and the finishing and the canonization of the Quran in 652. Can you see that? Which means if they're going to go with carbon dating, they're going to have to go with these laboratory results as well. Which shows that this Quran, the Sunnah manuscript, the Quran that is considered to be the oldest, predates Muhammad, the Quran, Islam, and Islam. In this case, by 100 years. And that's why it makes my job so easy. The more we scratch, the more we find. The more we find, the more they whine. The more they whine, the more we shine. Oh, how sublime. It's so good. And I love it that they love to put this stuff and make it calculate all over the top. But they need to go with the conclusions. If you want to go, you can read this for yourself. We're now pretty much destroying the laboratory reports. And that's why it's so good that Muslims, they put things out there before they think. And they've got to be careful. Carbon dating has always been known to be inexact. Therefore, that's why you need to go paleographical studies. And that's why you need to come back and realize that most of these maps, even if they want to go to paleographical, that's fine. Now, the other problem is, and there are 2 different kinds of studies going on simultaneously as we speak. One are what we call the diacritical differences, the diacritical variants. What do I mean by diacritical variants? These are the ones that we've been introducing the last 2 years. We introduced them 2 years ago down at Speaker's Corner. On my team is a lady named Hatun Tash. If you don't know who she is a legend. And I feel so privileged to work with her. And we have done amazing stuff. If you want to go up on Fander Films and go and see what we have done in the last 2 years. In fact, I just can't keep this woman down. She's a Turk. Her father is a well-known imam in Turkey. 2 of her brothers were killed because of her. One was shot in the head, one was run over because they would not kill her when she became a Christian. She had to flee Turkey. She came and joined our team and has been was part of our Fander team for 3 years. She is the one that's on the ladder with me for the last 2 years out at Speaker's Corner. And this woman is voracious. I mean, she is a Saul who has become a Paul, or a Sauline who's become a Pauline, I guess is a better way to put it, since she's feminine. But this woman only sleeps 4 nights a week. She only sleeps 4 nights a week. She spends up all night just studying and studying and studying and studying. She goes down to the corner, even now, even though I'm no longer there, she gets up there and she comes out with new material, almost 4 to 5 different subjects every week. I've never seen somebody who studies as much as she. I've never seen a mind like hers before. God has given her an amazing gift. She goes into 4 mosques every week, walks into the mosque uninvited. And these are not Turkish mosques, these are Pakistani mosques, the most radical mosques. And she goes and carrying her bag with behind, and inside her bag are 31 different Arabic Qurans. 31 different Arabic that she has found in 3 different countries, in Jordan, in Morocco, and in Yemen. Now, what's fascinating, she doesn't even speak Arabic or read Arabic. She hasn't done any of this work. All she has done is done the other work of finding them, giving them to the Arabic scholars who refuse to get up online and refuse to put their heads in front of the camera, and she says, I'll do it for you. I'll put my head in front of the camera. I'll take the abuse. And she has been abused. She has been beaten up. 2 years ago, they almost killed her. If you go up and back in 2016, look on the videos of her next to me. You'll see she has a scarf around her neck. She has a neck brace on because she could not move her neck more than right and left. She has a cast on her legs. She was in a mosque, and because she was introducing this material, they took her outside, they beat her up, they broke her foot, broke 3 ribs in her rib cage, strung her up, or stringing her up. In the process of hanging her, when she got to her rape alarm, managed to sound, some Polish neighbors came and caught the 5 guys. They're now in prison. And the very next week after she got out of the hospital, she went right back to the same mosque where this happened, right up to the imam who was watching all of this in the doorway, and he says, I think now I've earned the right to come and tell you about these Qurans. Now, how do you get a woman like that? In that exact same week, she got up on the ladder with me. I could not keep her down. And for 3 months, she was on the ladder with me with her neck brace. She would not talk about it. She never went to the press about it. Never. You won't hear this on the press. She doesn't want people to know what the Muslims are doing to her. She doesn't really care. She says, I don't have enough time to waste with that. We need to bring as many Muslims to Jesus Christ. Please don't fool around with fear. Get rid of fear. That's why. What a woman to have on your team. But she is a Paul. You know, she's just like Paul from the first century. Now, she's done the work on this. Let's go through and see what we're talking about. When you look at these texts, take a look at that text up there. You notice things are missing. You notice the dots are missing. You also notice that the vowelization is missing. And what we mean by the fatha, that's the tama, the u, and the kasra, which is the e. There are only 3 vowels in Arabic, but those vowels did not exist in the 7th century. When these manuscripts were written in the 8th century, those vowels still did not exist. Including the 9th century. They were only introduced in the 9th, some say as late as the 10th century. Nonetheless, the vowelization wasn't there. The also problem is, when you look at, you notice the dots are missing. Now, why is that wrong? Now, if you look at this manuscript, you will see some dots have been added in. Here you're starting to see the photocopy, some ads. You can't see, it's probably too far away, but when you get the PowerPoint, you'll see what I'm talking about. Here's a Shiite puzzle. Why is it we need dots and why is it you need vowelization? Well, if you know Arabic, there are 28 letters in the Arabic alphabet. But of the 28 letters, 6 of them are unique. Let me give you an example. The aleph is unique. So is the kaf. So is the lam. So is the mim. So is the ha. Now, the waw is the last one. Those are the only unique letters. All the other 22 letters needs dots because you can create all kinds of words just by looking at a simple smiley face. Let's look at the smiley face there. There's a smile. You put 1 dot above it, it becomes a nun, an anu. Put 2 dots, it becomes a ta. You put 3 dots, it becomes a tha. You put a dot below it, and it becomes a ba. 2 dots, it becomes a ya. So depending on where you put the dots, you can have either a na, ta, tha, ba, ya. Can you see the problem? You can get 5 different letters just by one little bowl shape. If you want to take a look at when we look at put 3 smiley faces together, 3 bowl shapes, you can get 19 different words, depending on where you put the dots above the middle of the line. So all these manuscripts have no dots, which means there's all kinds of variations of what these words could be, or what the sentences could be, and that's why you need context. And if you ask David and me, there is no context, is there not, in the Quran? You have to find your own context. Can you see the problems that Muslims have as to how they want to interpret? So let's look at some of these variants. And these are what we call diacritical variants. Now, Hatun has found, in this case, there was only 26 she has here. This was when I put this slide together. She has found another 6 on top of that. Actually, we should be able to find 37. There are 37 out there. We've only found 31 so far. We're still looking. We're still going to find the other 5. Every one of these I'm putting up on the screen here. Every one of them is different. How many of you knew this before today? A few of you. We took this down to Speaker's Corner 2 years ago, and then we redid it again a year ago. We almost didn't leave the corner. They tried to grab these from our bags. They did not like this. See, Muslims have never heard this. And this is not the most damaging material. This is not that damaging. Why? Well, take a look at when these diacritical marks were introduced. Here's when they were introduced. They were introduced in 5 cities. And if I can see the names on these cities. Can someone help me? Mecca, Medina, Damascus, Kufa, and Basra. So 3 of them, 2 of them are in Iraq, 1 of them is in Syria, and the other 2 are in Saudi Arabia, modern day Saudi Arabia. So we're talking about 5 cities, and all of these come from students. These are students writing in the 9th and 10th century. So we're talking about 144 years to 200 years later that these diacritical marks were introduced. And there are 37 of these different students that had, every one of them had their different derivations. Now, when you look at these brown circles, there you can find how different they are. And I'm looking at some of them that are 2,000 differences. Some have 1,300 different. One of them, Abdul al-Hayth, has 5,000 differences, diacritical differences from his text and the Quran that we have today. Hatun has already found almost 60,000 differences just by looking at these 31 Qurans. That's as much as she's found today. Now, she's not doing the work. When I say Hatun's found it, it's the Arab scholars that are doing it for her. 59,776 the last I talked to her. It's over 60,000 now. So what are we talking about? Are these really damaging? Well, what's fascinating is, of these 37 different students, only one was chosen for the Quran we're using today, and that's the one I have circled there. His name is Hafs. He died in 796. Muhammad died in 632. That's 144 years later. So they have just taken one of these 37 and made it the official text. And that was the text that was created in 1924. Why was that created in 1924? Do any of you know? Do you know this, David? It was created in Egypt, in Cairo, because the government in Cairo had a problem. They were noticing that there in the high schools, there were these many different derivations. There were so many different Qurans there, coming from many different sources, that they realized that they needed to have one Quran that they could use to standardize all the texts for the exams at the end of the year. So they asked Al-Azhar to put together a committee, which they did, and the committee chose Hafs, this man who died in 796, and used his Quran as the official text. That became so successful that in 1936, it was then spread nationwide. So all of Egypt then used the Hafs text. But what was interesting, this goes back to 1924. In 1924, what did they do with all the other Qurans that were different? They took them out and they drowned them in the Nile River. They're still there today. They have tried to dump them in the Nile River, thinking that will rid the Qurans. We have now found all of them in different marketplaces in Jordan, in Yemen, and just Morocco, just those three countries. We have now found 31 of them. Can you see? You cannot destroy the Quran by either burning it or drowning it in the Nile. You've got to deal with these differences. In 1936, it was known as the King Fuad, named after King Fuad at that time, which became the official text for all of Egypt. By 1985, the Saudi Arabian government realized that this is so successful in Egypt, let's make it worldwide. And so by 1985, every manuscript of the Quran had to be the Hafs text. So we're talking only 33 years ago, which means many of you sitting in this audience today are older than the Quran. How does that make you feel? The Quran we're using today came from an Egyptian edict done in 1924 to standardize the high school text, which then became a worldwide edict by the Saudi Arabian government in 1985, coming from a student who lived in 796, 144 years after Muhammad, because he did not like the text that was sitting in front of him, and reproduced it in his own image. It's as man-made as you can get. Now, there's the name of the different transmitters and readings. When we look at the variants, I could spend it on, we have 70 of these. This is the one the Muslims always like to look at. This is the old one, and it looks at the Dagger of the Maliki versus Maliki. The owner of the day versus the king. And I say, see, that's nothing. The owner of the day is the king. The king is the owner of the day. Without thinking, that's the least most problematic. If you want to look at some other ones, here you have they lie versus they accuse others of lying. That changes the text. So when you change the diacritical marks, you do change the text. When you go to the next one here in chapter 2, verse 58, they shall forgive versus they shall be forgiven. Now wait a minute. Do they forgive or do they get forgiven? Well, there's a theological problem. So you can't say that this does not change the meaning. Here is atakizu versus atakazu, which is take you or they took, they have taken. Here's another example of takuluna versus yakuluna. You say or they say. Who's doing the same here? Who knows better than Allah? You or the others? You is actually in plural, so it's actually a grammatical mistake. Now here is miskinen versus masakina, which is a poor person versus a poor man. Who is it you're to? So for those unable to fast, can they feed one poor man or many poor men? I'd like to know how many I'm going to have to feed. Here, let's go to this one here. Here is, they ask you about the wine and gambling, say in them is a great sin, or that is gabirun, versus in them is plenty of sin. That's kathirun. Two completely different words. So is drinking wine and gambling a great sin or plenty of sin? Is it something which is big or something which is much? Again, a matter of quantity. I'm going to give you some other good ones here. Here's the problem with he and we. It's the who is God who's speaking here. So her Lord Allah made her grow in a good manner and put her under the care of Zachariah. Versus the Warswitz says, so her Lord made her grow in good manner, and he, Zachariah, took charge of her. So did Allah put Zachariah in charge of Mary, or did Zachariah simply take charge? Is the action here done by Allah or by Zachariah? And here's let's go to this one here. I like this one. Yabguna and Yurja'una versus Tabguna and Turja'una. Do they seek other than the religion of Allah, willingly or unwillingly? And to him shall they all be returned. Translated in the worship to do you seek other than the religion of Allah, willingly or unwillingly? And to him shall you be returned. Up to now, the verses are all using they, but Wash uses you. So it has a grammatical problem here because it's made it from plural, masculine plural, down to singular. Is the plural form of second masculine singular form who seeks and return? Can you see? Not only is it a theological problem, it's also a grammatical problem. Here's one. If I was a prophet, do prophets fight or do they get killed? I'd like to know whether I'm going to get killed or I simply fight. Now we can go on and on. There's about 70 of these. I don't want to go through all of them because it would take too much time. But you need to go through these. These are great. Let's just see if there's another one here I'd like to just point out. We did this from the ladder, and boy, the Muslims tried to pull these things out of our hands. They could not deal with this. They could not, because they had no idea that this changes in every text, in every sake. It changes the text, it changes the meaning, it changes the theology, which means these are not incidental. Here's a good one. Surah 43, ayah 19. And they make angels who are slaves of the beneficent females, or it is now in the Lao translation, and they make the angels who are in the presence of the beneficent females. So, problem one, are the angels slaves of Allah or simply in the presence of Allah? Now, problem number two, is it the slaves or those in Allah's presence who will be made females? If I were an angel, I prefer being in God's presence than his slave. And if I were an angel, I would prefer if only the slaves were made females, thank you. Can you see? This has all kinds of intrinsic problems. So you can see why we are bringing this out to the public and why people need to know about it. You don't have to get into this. Don't feel that you need to get into this. Now, I notice I have not brought you the most damaging material. This is the diacritical differences which were only introduced in the 9th and 10th century. The new material that's going to be introduced in November are the consonantal differences. Now, when I did my debate with Dr. Shabir Ali in 2014, at that time I only had 800, and I didn't show them, I just held them up. But there were 7 different areas of consonantal difference. Consonantal difference means the rosum is being changed. This has nothing to do with the diacritical mark, this has nothing to do with vowelization. These are the actual texts being changed. And what Dr. Brubaker and his team have found now is that there are erasures, thousands of erasures, where they actually erase not just words, but entire lines. There are insertions, thousands of insertions, where they have added to not only words, but entire verses, entire lines above the line. Most curiously, there are coverings. Sometimes the coverings are just blank, sometimes the coverings have another verse written over the top of them, and there are tapings where they have taped entire sections of the page, which you'd like to look under to see why they're taking it over. In every case, when they looked at these erasures, when they looked at these insertions, when they looked at these coverings, when they looked at these tapings, in every case, the final result of what they come to in both the Topkapi, the Samarkand, the Ma'il, the Petropolis, the Sana, and the Husseini, in every case, they notice that it standardized the text. It brought the text to one standard text. And in every case, this is the modern 1924 text they're standardizing. So this has all been done in the last 94 years. This has all been done in the last 94 years. Why have we not known about this? Why has no one mentioned this before? We're going to uncover that. We've now come up with 4,000 of these differences. 4,000 that are all going to be introduced in a program that's coming out in November. It's called Quranic Gateway. Have you got this program, David? You need to get it. Stick it in your computer. It will have the entire Quran in all versions that you can get today. It'll have all the translations there of the Quran, so you have it in one place on your computer. it'll have word studies of every word in the Quran with graphs to show you how many times you can find that word in all throughout the Quran. So you can see pie graphs and also the other type of graphs. But what's most exciting, it also has embedded into the program all of these variants. Now, the thing is, they only show the variants there, and they just name it, but they don't give any conclusion. They don't unpack it. So that's what we're doing. We're now unpacking, and we're putting slides like you just seen up there. We're going to have this variant on this side, and we're going to have the Hafs manuscript on this side. And we're going to show you not only how these variants change the Quran, but they change the theology. This is much more damaging, because these are all from the 8th and 9th century. These are not from the 9th and 10th century. These have nothing to do with dots. This has to do with the actual text. Can you see how this is going to destroy the Quran? Can you see how after November we're going to have a huge outcry from the Muslims? And this is why I say it is not us that's going to destroy the Quran. It's the Quran itself that's going to destroy itself. And everything that we're looking at, you notice this entire talk, this is not a Christian polemic. I could be anybody standing up here. Anybody can use this material. When I left Speaker's Corner last July, the last week that I was there, as I was walking, the last man that came up to me to shake my hands was almost in tears. He was an atheist. And he said, "Jay, please don't leave. We need this material. We need what you're bringing up. Please, can you stay? We need what you're doing." I said, "Why are you as an atheist using my material?" He says, "Because you're doing what no one else has done." He says, we get sick and tired of Christians always getting up there and telling us their testimony. Who cares diddly squat about their testimony? That has nothing to do with me. But you are doing what no one else is doing. You're actually answering the question we're asking. We're not asking what God has done for you. We're asking a much more basic question. Is it true? That's what we're asking. The whole world is asking this question. Is it true? It's as simple as that. Now, until today, we didn't know how to confront that, Mr. Smith. We didn't know how to confront that until you start putting up all this manuscript evidence, until you start putting up all this documentary evidence, until you start putting up all this archaeological evidence. Suddenly you're speaking our language, because that's what we've been asking the Christian church to do, and you guys have done that. You've already passed that test. But the Muslims haven't even begun to do that. And I turned to them and says, "I want to thank you that you're using this, but I don't want you to use this. I don't want you to use this. Because you have no alternative to give them. You have nothing to offer them. You're just interested in destroying Islam. I don't want to destroy these beautiful people. These people I love. I've dedicated 37 years to these people. Please, please don't destroy their faith in God. Please don't destroy their faith in Scripture. Please don't destroy their faith in the prophetic line. Please don't destroy their faith in heaven and hell. Keep that there, but you can't, because you have no idea what I'm talking about. This is not your battle. This is our battle. Let us fight this battle. Because all you're going to do is make them nihilists. I want to bring them home. I want to bring them home to the real God, the real Jesus, the real prophetic line, and I want to bring them back to our Scripture. See, every one of these things I put up on the screen right now, everything, this is source criticism, this is manuscript criticism, this is historical criticism, this is called redacted criticism. Where do you think those criticisms were invented? They were created on the Bible. Without confronting the Bible back in the 1800s, we would never have historical criticism. Historical criticism is biblical criticism. The Bible has passed every one of these tests. We know it. We've been at the forefront of it. Most of our scholars, look at their names. They were the ones who were at the forefront of every one of these criticisms. And that's why we demand the same thing the atheists are demanding. We demand the same thing the humanists are demanding. We demand the same thing everybody should be demanding, except the Muslims. They do not want this. They are scared to death of this. And you'll see why. You'll see why. Folks, this is our battle. This is really our look, this is really, we are the only ones that not only understand it because we understand the power of Scripture, the atheist does it. We not only understand it because we understand the model of that Scripture, the Book of the Man. We understand the Book of the Man better than anybody else because no one else understands the Book of the Man. Your government doesn't understand, the military doesn't understand, the atheists don't understand, but Christians do because we go back to the Book of the Man. We understand how powerful Scripture is. We understand how powerful Jesus is. That's why, folks, get into this, folks. Learn this material. Help me, because there's so few of us that are using it. Help Dave. Listen, David and I and Sam Shamoon and Tony Costa, there's very few of us here in America that are doing this. We need your help. But see how, did you understand what I did today? Can you pick up what's happening? Can you see how easy this is? You have got what I didn't have 37 years ago, what I didn't have even 10 years ago, what David and I didn't even have 2 years ago. We will train you up. We will make sure that we help you with material so that you can learn it, but you need to learn this material because this is the most neutral critique you can get. And once you destroy the Quran, bring them back to the Bible. That's why we're doing the Quran today and the Bible tomorrow. Bring it home. God bless you.
Silly, could you come down for just a minute? This is Vasily. He's going to talk about him and his wife's ministry for about a minute, and then Maria's going to come up.
Yes, my name is Vasile Julian, and I'm the president of an organization called Reaching Mankind for Christ Ministries. We have presence in South Sudan and Uganda. We are working among the Muslims, among the enemies. We fight against them. We are working right now